Hello my friends, and welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video. Today, I wanted to lay out my thoughts on how the scope of the Tarkov community, which has drawn in players from many diverse gaming backgrounds and interests, is both the best thing about Tarkov and at times one of the root causes of the seemingly never-ending frustration that is always present around this game. Just to be clear, this video isn't calling out any part of the community, or saying that any one part of the Tarkov player base is better, worse, or more worthy of attention than others. It's not about drama or interpersonal stuff between creators. It's not about streamers versus normal players or rats versus chads. I know drama and public arguments between personalities in the community has been a hot topic lately, but that's not what this video is about. In this video, I want to talk about all of the different reasons people were drawn to Tarkov in the first place, from so many different corners of the gaming world. Then I want to discuss the wildly differing wants, needs, and expectations of different groups within the community, and how, because we're all stuck playing a single game mode with no separation of the player base, any changes made to the game are predestined to be loved by some and absolutely despised by others. To start off, I think it's pretty obvious to say that Tarkov is a game that has drawn people from almost every other part of the gaming space to it. The game has brought together elements from so many other types of games that, at least on the surface, it seems like it should kind of have something for everyone. Lots of games mash together features from other genres, but generally it's a much more conservative mixture, like an FPS with mild RPG elements, or a driving game with some shooting mechanics. Few games take on the scope of something like Tarkov or Star Citizen, where they're kinda trying to be every game all at the same time. The ability to attract players from almost every genre is great for growth and building a big community, but every different branch of that community came to the game for different reasons and has different expectations of it. Let's just do a little visual representation with a couple Venn diagrams so it's easy to see how quickly this can get out of hand. Let's start with Rainbow Six Siege, a pretty simple example that I've been playing off stream lately. Siege combines the 5v5 Counter-Strike search and destroy formula with ability-based hero shooter mechanics. That's a pretty simple combination, and it draws a fairly predictable cross-section of players. People who like 5v5 tactical shooters, and people who like ability-based hero shooters. That's a pretty easy combination to wrap your head around, and for developers and a community, there's really only two major pillars of the game to balance around. As long as the game retains some tactical shooter qualities, and the hero abilities are not too overpowered, both sides of the community can be happy, and the devs can make nice, targeted changes and fixes. Now let's take a look at Tarkov's Venn diagram. Tarkov is a single-life extraction shooter, MMO, FPS, RPG hybrid with loot, quests, story elements, PvP, survival mechanics, RPG skills, and a live, player-driven economy that also has an entire major system of the game to simulate real-life weapon building, weapon ballistics, and armor. Tarkov does not have a simple tagline to describe what the game is or what it's like to play it. That, to me, is one of the greatest strengths, but also its greatest struggle. Tarkov draws players from survival shooters who generally came from Rust and DayZ and were attracted by the allure of a survival game with more of a tactical PvP focus to it. Tarkov draws players from the wider competitive shooter community with the hardcore aesthetic of the game and the high-risk PvP. They see the difficult climb to the top of the endgame mountain and kinda take that as a personal challenge to get there first and smack down all the challengers on the way. Tarkov draws players from the Battle Royale genre for similar reasons, because it's a single life game and there's just an undeniable appeal to the formula of 10 players entering a map and fighting to be the last one standing, the one who gets all the rewards and all the dopamine. Tarkov draws players from the milsim and realism-based shooters like Arma and Squad, who see the gritty, realistic aesthetics of the game, the authentic recreation of real-life weapons, attachments, armor, and ammunition, and get hooked simply because no other game has such accurate visual replicas of all of this real gear. On that note, Tarkov also attracts people who are just gun enthusiasts in general, not even necessarily hardcore gamers. The weapon building in Tarkov is second to none, and for some players, that's really the biggest appeal. They basically just want to have fun building cool weapons and playing with them at their own pace. Tarkov also draws people in with its RPG elements. even if they are really only surface level. I have friends who kinda tried Tarkov because they saw the skills page and were baited in by the promise of a deep RPG underneath the survival simulator, and they were also really intrigued by the sheer amount of quests and unlockable stuff in the game. As a free-form, very open-ended game, Tarkov also attracts a whole lot of people who simply enjoy the freedom of playing a game that doesn't tell you how to play it. This can range from people who just like the randomness to people who want to roleplay and immerse themselves in the world as a character. People who just really like interacting with other players in weird ways. People who like to set challenges for themselves, and so many others. I'm sure there are many other sub-communities that we can think of, but for now I think this starts to illustrate my point. There's a lot of different communities with very different reasons for playing Tarkov, and as such, they all tend to have very different expectations and opinions on different parts of the game for very different reasons. Let's just take a few Tarkov mechanics and go over them and how different players perceive them. And very quickly, it should be obvious why it seems like no matter what the developers do, there's always a negative backlash. First, let's talk about inertia and the weight system in general. Easily one of the most controversial and divisive mechanics in Tarkov. To players who came to Tarkov to play a survival game, or a milsim game, or a tactical shooter, these mechanics are welcome additions that help separate Tarkov from other arcade shooters. The fact that they slow down the game and force you to choose your loadout carefully and weigh the risk versus reward of picking up too much loot is seen as largely a good thing by some people because it forces you to make choices and engage with the game mechanics. To more PvP-focused players, inertia in the weight system is just an annoyance, something that basically just gets in the way of their reflexes and instincts from other shooters. They look at these systems as little more than a speed bump that slows them specifically down and makes the game feel clunky. To some players, engaging with these mechanics is part of the fun of the game. To other players, their ultimate goal is to simply find ways to avoid or negate these mechanics so they don't get in the way of how they want to play the game. For another example, let's talk about weapons, ammo, and armor. Without a doubt, Tarkov's massive armory and the scope of things you can use and find in the game is a huge part of why it's so unique. There's so much to use and mess around with, all the way from rusty old World War II relics to the cutting edge of modern firearms technology. The game is constantly changing what we have access to, what we can easily buy or find, what we can reliably run for multiple raids in a row, and what we should consider rare or precious. The developers have made it pretty clear from the beginning that as time goes on, our access to the best items will be more and more limited. Basic gear will become more common, and the top tier items will become more difficult to consistently acquire. To some players, this is fine, almost welcome. They're on board with the idea that Tarkov is set in a war zone cut off from the outside world, and that should be reflected in what we have access to. They appreciate the mental exercise of evaluating what they have access to and how they can best use that stuff to accomplish whatever goal they have. To other players, they feel like they got hit with the old bait and switch every single time BSG takes a best-in-slot item away from the traders. They don't see it as immersive or fun to be restricted in what they use. They see it as an annoyance because now they have to figure out what the next best thing is and simply make do with it. None of these opinions are right or wrong. At least that's how I see it. All players have a different expectation of what the game should be and how it should feel. I'm not right or superior in my opinion because I want Tarkov to be more like a survival game, any more than a PvP player is objectively correct in saying Tarkov got worse when inertia was added. Ask 10 different people what they think of a mechanic in Tarkov, and you're probably going to get 10 different answers, none of which are really correct or true. So this brings me to my final point. The fact that we're all stuck in this together, with only one game mode to choose from, and no ability to separate different parts of the community and give them what they want out of Tarkov. Over the past 2 wipes, I've come to the opinion that what Tarkov needs more than anything right now is another game mode. Whether that be the arena, which supposedly is coming soon, or something like separate hardcore servers with different rule sets, I don't care, but one of these things needs to be a reality in Tarkov. Regardless of what you like or hate about Tarkov, you only have one option: play raids. We can't choose who we're playing with or against, there is no rankings, there is no way to influence the type of gameplay that you want. Jimmy the survivalist, who's role-playing how he would get through the apocalypse with his SKS, is stuck in the same lobby with Billy, the 10,000-hour PvP sweat, who knows every angle and exploit on the map. And regardless of who wins the fight when they meet, one player is going to walk away just kind of frustrated by the whole situation. If Jimmy kills Billy with a nice one tap from the bush that he's hiding in, Billy curses all the camping little bush rats in the game. If Billy kills Jimmy with a well-placed right-hand peek headshot, Jimmy gets frustrated at game mechanics ruining his immersion. There has always been a lot of resistance to splitting the Tarkov community, but at this point, it feels like the obvious thing to do in my opinion. If Arena existed, the PvP players would have an outlet for their competitive drive in an environment where it's expected to play all out and use every mechanic possible to win, and they wouldn't have to suffer through so many of the mechanics and situations that they just don't like. If hardcore servers existed, the Doomsday Preppers and the role players would have a safe space to exist and play their version of Tarkov where everyone has an extremely limited economy and access to supplies. The neat part about splitting the community is that it still leaves room for overlap. PvP players would also play on hardcore servers for the extra challenge, and survival players would also play Arena when they just need a quick fix for combat. Because we're all forced into one game mode, none of the sub-communities within Tarkov have a real outlet where they can do what they want to do with like-minded people. Everyone is instead forced together, all the competing interests and playstyles conflicting with each other and creating an environment where nobody gets what they want, where the community is never truly happy about big changes, because for every person that likes them, there's another that really hates them. I know these are all simple answers on paper, but in practice it's another thing entirely. BSG wanted Arena to be out 4 months ago, but clearly it's a pretty complex situation. Creating hardcore servers sounds easy on paper, but in practice, who knows how much extra dev work or simply cost that would require. That being said, I do think it's becoming clearer every day that Tarkov needs something to create an outlet for different types of players. Games like DayZ and Rust are all based on entering different servers that often have wildly different rule sets and modifiers to make a unique experience, tailored to what those players want. And I think that's the core reason they've been around for so long, and have fostered so many very distinct communities that can exist separately from each other in the same game. Someday, I hope Tarkov can do the same thing, because I think the community would be much less eager to constantly be at each other's throats if we just had some way to give different groups of players what they want without feeling like another part of the community has to be sacrificed in order to do that. That's it. That's the video. Maybe you found this enlightening, maybe you think I'm an idiot. Let me know down below. I'm really interested to know whether this idea resonates with people or if I'm just an old man yelling at the clouds. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream and Discord server down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.